I'm very excited to introduce to you some of our really excellent African American Studies students. And as a matter of fact, Melita, why don't you come on up? Because I'm missing one person. So you come on up and sit up here. She's also another one of our wonderful alumni. And she wasn't sure she was going to make it, but since she made it, we're going to put her to work. Okay, so we're going to start off with Tiana.
Okay, so my name is Tiana Warner. This is my 5th fall semester here, but I'm technically still a 4th-year student. I took a semester off. African American Studies major with a Gender, Women, Sexuality Studies minor and a Social Justice minor. Planning to graduate next semester, if God wills it. So I'm also a spoken word poet. I just started applying to grad school, so hopefully I get accepted into some programs. I don't know. You know, I'm not entirely sure what I want to do, but I'd like to teach one day, you know, hopefully. Like they said earlier, when you learn it, teach it. So, you know, that's what I'm hoping to do with my degree and what I learned here, and what I have learned, and what I can hope to continue to learn.
Talk about being a Nesbitt award.
Oh yes. I did win the Nesbitt Promise Prize scholarship, so I got to, got a paid trip to Chicago, got to stay in a nice hotel downtown. That was fun. And it was a really good experience. I got to connect with a lot of other great folks and people who are Black leaders and aspiring to be Black leaders. So, you know, I try to keep in contact with some of them. I've come a lot because it's been a tough year for everyone, a tough few years. But that was a really great experience. I took a lot of leadership knowledge from that I have implemented mostly in Des Moines. So I don't know why I didn't think about talking about this, but the summer of 2020, everything went down. Me and 9 other young people, a few of them who were majors in the African American Studies department. My sister, she's here as well, she's a minor. We created a nonprofit organization called the Des Moines Black Liberation Movement. So that was a lot of protesting, events, community planning, education within Des Moines. So I was arrested a few times. I'm currently on probation for a felony charge. So, you know, that's fun, but I'm still here, so I guess that's what matters. And that's all about myself. Mostly try to be an activist, but yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Tiana. It's still morning, actually, so good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's well and enjoyed the speakers earlier. Tiana mentioned something that Dr. Robinson said that I also took to heart. If you don't know it, learn it. When you learn it, teach it. I think for a lot of us that kind of really captures what it is that we're trying to do here at the university and also in our pursuit of African American Studies. For me in particular, the African American Studies graduate certificate. I have not said it yet. My name is Michael Julius Downey. I'm a graduate student here and an MFA candidate at the Idle Writers Workshop in Fiction, as well as an African American Studies certificate, graduate certificate candidate. I don't know if we're candidates in it, right? But one of the things that people normally learn quickly about me is that I'm from Atlanta. I think Eva is as well. That's a big part of my identity in this space. Strangely, not when I'm back home in Atlanta. Like when you're where you're from, you don't really talk, hey, Atlanta, no, we're all here. But in other spaces, those are the identities that you kind of represent. There's a reason I said that, right? Partly, let me say this. Right now, my mind is in a lot of different places. In the graduate program that I'm in, we're doing our final exams right now. And I actually had to submit that this morning before I came over here. So I'm getting my mind out of that. But what was cool about working on some of the questions and the essays that I worked on for my final exam, I was really forced to kind of interrogate this question of what type of writer do I want to be? And that's one of the central questions that I came into this program with, but also into the African American Studies Certificate program with. What type of writer do I want to be? I had this sense that I wanted to be a writer for the culture, that I wanted to represent myself and my people in informed, authentic, and unique ways. But what does that really mean? How do you learn that? And for me, coming into a space like this, you know, primarily focusing on questions of craft within my writing, I also wanted to know the literary traditions, which a lot of the things that I read are based on, as well as the oral traditions and the blues traditions and the religious traditions that those things are based on. And in taking the foundations course in African American Studies, it was a place where I learned a lot of those things. And as well, I had the great fortune of also teaching one of the African American Studies courses, a Black Experience course, where I also engaged with students in these questions of where we come from, where are we now, and where can we go? And that's really informed the way that I think about my writing and what I can do. You know, I mentioned, you know, I'm from Atlanta. The Braves currently are in the World Series, which is a fascinating thing, right? Because, you know, yesterday I had on my Braves cap, I was repping and everything. Like, we lost real bad, but that's another issue. But representing Atlanta, representing the Braves, like, I ask myself sometimes, what right do I have to do that? Right? I wasn't born in Atlanta, right? I don't have any money invested in the Braves. Like, who am I to represent those things, right? And in representing the Braves, like, we can celebrate, like, oh, they're in the World Series, they're doing all of these great things. But also, we have to recognize that earlier this year, there's a lot of controversy around, like, who the Braves are and the types of cultural appropriation that they do. The All-Star game was taken away from Atlanta, right? So there's so many complicated things within the identities that we represent that we have to struggle with, that we have to grapple with. Whether it's Atlanta, whether it's a sports team, whether it's just our Blackness. And in African American Studies, I've really had an opportunity to really grapple with some of the things that are sometimes conflicting in the way that I see myself as a writer and as a Black man in this country. You know, I have a section of books in my home that are filled with all the works of Toni Morrison. And right next to it, I have a section of books that are filled with all the works of Robert Beck, Iceberg Slim, right? So I find as much joy in reading contemporary modern literature as I do in reading street literature. Is there a problem with that? What are the questions that those different works are asking? And how do they relate to each other? And what are the audience that they're speaking to? And how do you kind of understand who you are as a writer, but who you are also as a reader? And I just had so much joy in exploring those questions through my program at the Writers Workshop, but also through the experiences and the people that I've met in the African American Studies Department. It's very interdisciplinary, right? So you meet historians, you meet musicians, you meet people that are exploring the same questions from so many different areas and disciplines and positions and vantage points and perspectives and stages in life that has really enriched the way that I think about my own writing, and hopefully the things that I am able to produce as I move forward on this literary journey that I've chosen to pursue with no clear idea of what it will look like down the road. And my family constantly reminds me of that. So I will leave it there right now. Thank you so much, and I'll pass it on to Ethan.
I'm a little emotional today, not just because the rain didn't cry, but also because I remember the last time I was in this room, I was a freshman, and the people who would end up being my sorors were graduating college, and I was just like, wow, I can't wait to know what that feels like. And now I'm graduating, which is something that nobody in my family has done. And I'm applying to grad school, which is something no one in my family has done. Really emotional day. My name is Ever Taylor. I am a senior. I am a double major in creative writing and African American studies with a minor in social justice and a double emphasis in business and equity. I am the chapter president of the dynamic Delta chapter of Delta Sigma Biz for Incorporated. I am also the co-president of the National Panelist Council, affectionately known as the D9, or Divine Nine. I'm a co-founder for Iowa Freedom Writers. I'm a teaching artist for Atlanta WordWorks, which is a nonprofit organization in Atlanta that promotes inner city kids therapizing through poetry. I'm a spoken word artist. I am a singer. I'm an auntie. I am a lover. I am a fighter. I'm a Hawkeye, which I finally am learning how to say. This past season, I've just been going back through my transcript and through my Iowa journey, through my writing, and I'm really just now getting to the point of evaluating what it means to be a Hawkeye. My freshman year was spent fighting with the administration and fighting with university student government on behalf of Black students. So I've always seen my existence in opposition to the institution. And then I became a senior, and I realized that that's what college is about. You know, college is about making your university a place where lineage can happen. College is about questioning the systems that we have in place. College is about becoming a historian and being a part of history. So first, I just want to thank Dr. Berry for asking me to be on this panel, and also being a guiding light through my Iowa experience. And I'm just very proud of all the Black women who came before me at this university, you know, who laid down the pavement for all of us, truly. Yeah. That's been my experience. I look forward to talking more on the panel and during the luncheon, and thank you for the time. Oh, I'm also the most recent recipient of the Marie Nesbitt Promise Prize Award, and I'm really thankful for being able to receive that award, as it has allowed me to stay in school, and it's given me great mentors who are helping and being there for me, and every student needs that. Amen.
I work with the University of Iowa True Outward Bound program, so a lot of the work we do is going into rural communities, helping students who are particularly from certain historically marginalized backgrounds, such as being potentially first-generation college students, low-income, or students from underrepresented, historically marginalized, and oppressed populations. And so, with that work every day, I have an opportunity to be a co-producer in students shaping their own knowledge and everything. And that's what this program has taught me is that how to be a co-producer, how to be an advocate, and also knowing for myself as a white individual, where my place is at. Like, I don't need to be dictating every single conversation. I don't need to be dominating how policies and decisions are made. I can take, what the program has taught me is how to take myself and stop making it about me. Stop centralizing whiteness, and how to consider everything else around me. To not say that it's great that we're becoming more diverse, because that word diversity and diverse, it's gotten to the point where it's become one of those buzzwords in higher education particularly. And the program has challenged me to both, when I was a student, intellectually, I was able to write an honors thesis on the Iowa Edge program. So if you don't know about the Iowa Edge program, it is this pre-orientation program where students from certain specific identity backgrounds and communities come and join the campus, get more about resources, and more or less just learn to build community before classes start. And so through that program and my passion in AFAM, in African American Studies Department and program, I was able to culminate everything and, you know, ask myself, what can I do as an individual in this program to support the larger community? And so for me, that was doing research. And through that process itself, just doing a thesis, I was forced to confront myself, my own biases, my own perceptions of what I thought research would look like, how I should collect data. But when I'm collecting data, how am I ensuring that I'm not centralizing my whiteness or whiteness in the modality of collecting this data? So when I'm asking questions like, what is it, like, you know, was X, Y, or Z successful for you? It forced me to ask the question, I can ask, you know, what's successful for somebody and what you know, success is. But is my perception or my bias of what success is through a lens of whiteness affecting everything or affecting the work I'm doing? And that's what I owe to this program, to everybody in it. And what they taught me was to stop centralizing whiteness, to let, for example, the students I work with be the producers of their own knowledge. How can I center their experiences, and how can I do the work to help them in agency in their own goals? And that's what this program taught me. It also gave me a lot of great friends. I have so many friends I got from the AFAM program. I know one was back there, to Shayla Harrington. She was one of my best friends, and we went through a number of classes together. It was such a great experience. And through the AFAM program, I was also able to apply for graduate school, so I'm a candidate for my Master of Public Affairs and Policy at Indiana University. And I'm doing that part-time online, but the program has really helped me think about, you know, when we're having these discussions about policy, about analysis, about resource distribution, about even things like municipal taxing, how's that affect the different folks around us? How do we not center, you know, rich or upper class, white, straight, cis men? How do we ask the question of how is whiteness affecting our policy processes? How is it affecting the things we're doing? And how can we challenge that? And that's what I really appreciate about the AFAM program, is that it encouraged me to push back against my professors, push back against my colleagues, my classmates in those spaces. And so I'm hoping that one day, because of this program, I'm inspired to, you know, do a PhD in policy, but particularly focusing on policy processes with a critical race theory lens. So asking, where does whiteness engender itself in all these processes, and how does it affect the outcomes? How does internal biases or internalized oppression affect those policy outcomes and those services? And for everything that's good has happened to me in my 4 years at the University of Iowa and 2 as a full-time employee now, I owe it all to the African American Studies program, because I came in really lost. And when I took my first AFAM class, I instantly knew I was home. So thank you to everyone who's here, and thank you to the program.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tristan, because my son's name is Tristan, so I was like, oh, yay, I have some familiarity. My son is 21, so not that I'm that old. But anyway, good morning, everyone. I think, are we still morning or afternoon? I'm on Eastern Standard Time, so I don't know what time it is. But my name is Melita Pope Mitchell, and I arrived at the University of Iowa in the fall of 1991 as a biology pre-physical therapy major. Because everyone told me in my hometown of Gary, Indiana, and we talked about repping Atlanta, I rep Gary, Indiana everywhere I go. But everyone told me in my hometown of Gary, Indiana, that I was smart and I needed to go to school and major in something STEM and go into healthcare so that I could be successful. And when I got here to Iowa, I did just that. And I found out, as much as I loved the sciences during K through 12, I did not love the sciences here. It was too many people and too many complications and too many textbooks that I didn't want to read, and they weren't grabbing my attention, and it just wasn't fun anymore. But I always loved writing, and I remember taking my first course, just as an elective course in African American, then we called it African American World Studies, and it was with the now Dr. Sean Alexander, who was a graduate student here at that time. And I remember sitting there in the classroom thinking, wow, I knew some of this because I did have the privilege of having Black history taught to me. Being from Gary, Indiana, if you don't know, you will know that it is a predominantly African American city. And so I did have that experience. We did have Black history in K through 12, which was a wonderful foundation that I realized not a lot of my peers had once I arrived here. But just listening and learning about the variety and the experiences, some that are generalized to all African Americans, but some that are very unique to African Americans that I didn't know and didn't understand at the time. And I remember thinking, I could listen and learn and read and write this stuff all day. And so when I went home, I talked about it. I think I've done a minor in African American Studies. And my dad was like, oh, that's great, no problem. Then as I progressed through my coursework and I started not paying so much attention in biology and chemistry and those grades reflecting such, I decided I really want to major in African American Studies and I want to become a history professor. And so when I went home and I told everybody that, it was like, no, you can't do that. Like, what are you thinking? No, that's not a good decision. So, but at the end of the day, it's my decision, and that's what I'm going to do. And luckily, I did have parents. I come from a working class family. My father worked in a Union Tank Car Company, which made railroad tank cars, and my mother was a RN. And I was very fortunate. I'm an only child, so yes, I am spoiled, but I was very fortunate that my parents planned for me. And so they paid for my undergraduate degree. I didn't have to take out any loans or anything like that. So I knew that while that's not the path they necessarily saw for me, I was blessed that they understood my passion and my vision of what I wanted to do and still supported me in that. So I thank them. My mother has passed, and I actually have a scholarship here at Iowa through the School of Nursing in her name. But I thank my parents, Carmelita and Sylvester Pope, for their love and support and understanding that their daughter was going to be successful regardless of what her major was. And it could be African American history. And how I used that, I left Iowa and I moved down to Houston. I worked there for just under 2 years as I decided which graduate schools I wanted to apply to. By the time I left Iowa, and let me backtrack, I took a class with Dr. Berry, who is also my sorority sister, and I still have the paper that I wrote in her class. I look at it every now and then. It was a paper dissecting Ice Cube's CD that had just came out. And I got an A. But I love that paper because what her class and what the department taught me was how to look at things in our culture that we take for granted every day. You think about Ice Cube, you think about gangster rap during that time, but I took that album and I dissected it and I listened to the messages and I listened to the politics and I listened to the words that were coming through this artist that so many people disregarded during the time. During the 90s, the early and mid 90s, when gangster rap came out, it was, that was all trash and, it wasn't worth anything and why are you listening to that? But the politics that Ice Cube talked about, that's just one of the highlights of my experience being in this program, that I'm able to look at things that the majority of our world, I won't even say our country, that our world looks at as worthless or as violent or as ignorant or whatever label they want to choose it to, and I'm able to dissect that and understand the history of how we got there. I'm able to understand the politics. I'm able to understand the message. And I've taken that and I've used that as an activist, both in my personal life and in my professional life. So I ended up at the University of Michigan. I have a master's degree from U of M, which they did pay for, and in higher education administration with a concentration in student development. I went into higher education as a student affairs professional. And I worked in Michigan for about 8 years before my family and I transplanted ourselves down to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I found myself wondering, okay, what do I do now? Because at Michigan, quite like Iowa, I thought that that would be, you know, my lifetime career. You kind of get into these huge Research One universities, and there are a lot of places to float and travel and build a career. I found myself in Charlotte, like, I have no idea what I'm going to do here. But what I have been called to do and what I enjoy doing, and I'm so dedicated and enthusiastic about this work now, I found myself at Johnson C. Smith University, which I had never heard of in my life. I'd never heard of Johnson C. Smith University, but Johnson C. Smith University is Charlotte's only historically black college and university. And I found myself there working, and because of the training that I received at Iowa, and because of my understanding of who we were as a people, both here in the United States and across the world, I was able to find my place at an HBCU, and I was able to help those students. Many, like Tristan said, I work with our first generation students, and it's allowed me to have a perspective where I can now be an activist for that university and for those students as they try to make their place in the world. So I can't say how much I've appreciated the foundation and education that I received at Iowa through the African American Studies Department. I completed my doctoral degree in education at North Carolina State University, and I talk about Iowa everywhere I go. And the funny part is, of course, as a black woman, most people are like, you went to Iowa? Are there black people in Iowa? And that's the other thing I learned through this wonderful program, the history of what Iowans and black Iowans have done to move the movement forward. And I'm able to articulate that to people. I'm able to tell them that Iowa is an amazing place. Even with our fraternities and sororities that I'll talk about, ours specifically, you know, when you look at Delta Sigma Theta and this chapter being the 4th chapter chartered in the history of that organization, and what that meant and what those women were doing here and why that chapter was chartered here. If you look at the single letter chapters in our organization and you look at where they were placed and you look at what those women were doing as a social movement, you will be amazed at what people at Iowa have and continue to do. So I will stop because I'm long-winded as well. Thank you, Dr. Berry, for allowing me to participate in this panel, and I look forward to further discussions, and I'll pass it over to my classmate.
Say good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rolla Gibson. I come from Cedar Rapids, about 27 miles north of here, and I graduated in '97, emphasis in African American World Studies. And I want to say first thank you for Dr. Berry for putting this together and also reaching out to me to be a part of this. I am truly humbled and honored to be here, to be able to speak. And you know, at this stage of my life, I think about, you start to reflect and think about choices you made and things, experiences you've been through and whatnot, and what this university means to me. You know, in Cedar Rapids at that time, we had a smaller number. We don't have like a large number of African Americans there, but a smaller number even back then. And coming here and seeing and meeting the people that I met and built relationships with, it energized me. It was infectious to be able to be with them, and so I come behind. I came in '92, so I come 1 year behind my good sister Melita, and the things that we did together. I don't know what the culture is like here now. I don't get down this way too much. I'm currently a program manager for Foundation 2 Crisis Services, Youth Shelter, work with adolescents between 11 and 17. So, and that really requires a lot of my time. I wasn't sure if I was going to make it today, so again, I am glad that I'm able to be here. But back then, in '92, and the years after, I mean, the way that we stuck together, the way that we communicated, the way that we moved. I think was it '93 that we did a march, and just like those type of experiences. And when I came, my first major, what I thought I was going to be here, or started in, was dance and music and whatnot. And I'm not quite sure where the turn happened. Took a couple, similar to what Alicia took a couple of those elective classes. And so I was like, yeah, I like this. I'm being introduced to Frederick Douglass. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I know how that took to me. But then I said, when I got here, to see that there was a class and more classes, and that's how the course of my journey changed, and I'm thankful for that. So, I'm here, and it means a lot. So I wasn't expecting to see Melinda. Like I said, we have some stories that we have, and she was really like a big sister to me, and so, that emotional thing that can happen a little bit too for myself, seeing her here today, so I wasn't expecting that. So I'm thankful for you too as well. I appreciate you. So, I'm Hawkeye for life, and that's not ever going to change, and I'm thankful for the experience and being able to be here as well.
I come back to Iowa, I'm always concerned about community. I know that we are different generations, and we're not young anymore, even though we like to think it, until my dance partner and I get out there and realize we're not. But when I come back, and before the pandemic, I was here quite often. I was serving on the board for the then University of Iowa Alumni Association, and Lynette Marshall and her team are so gracious to allow me to serve on the Alumni Leadership Council. But when I come back, the sense of community is so different. When we were here in the 90s, we didn't have, when you were talking about that Florence Slater, that sounds like a wonderful place to be, but we created that community for ourselves. And when I come back, I'm always concerned because I don't see that type of communal feel at the university anymore. I've been in some discussion with some individuals, both through the network, and I know Heather and I have talked about building this mentorship program. And you talked about a peer mentorship program here on campus, but I'm really interested in building an alumni mentorship program with the students here, because it can be a lonely place, and I recognize that. And there are things that you will experience at Iowa, particularly if you're not from a place like Iowa, that are difficult to manage through. But I will say that, at least in my experience during the 90s, I had people that looked like me, that understood me, that enjoyed the same things that I did, that allowed me to move through that. You talked about when we actually respected the Million Man March, and many of the female students here did not go. And some of the brothers that couldn't make it there, we recreated that march. We marched with them here on campus to honor that. We also had, several protests. We had the Chris Brick cartoon in the Daily Iowan with the black man being lynched in the cartoon. We were a very tight-knit community, and I know from speaking to alumni from the 80s and the 70s and the 60s that they were also a very tight-knit community. So I want to make sure that students, African-American students in particular, know that there can be a sense of community here at Iowa, that those things can be developed and nurtured by people who may not be here anymore. So, I definitely want to reach out and put that olive branch out, that I would love to work on that. We've talked about it a couple of times in the network, but as you can tell, a lot of us are busy, and so it doesn't quite It doesn't quite take off the way I would like it to take off, but the sense of community here, and that's one thing I think that the African American Studies program also helped to build, because you notice that no matter what the major, even if this wasn't their major, there were always students taking the class, and we were always having those discussions in the union, in the residence halls, sometimes at the parties. We would still be having those discussions about the things that we learned, and we want to continue to create and to build upon that. You know, I think, and I just want to toot her horn for a second, I think Dr. Berry is doing an amazing job of bringing the focus back to the importance of this program. You know, we talk about scholars like Darwin Turner and everyone else who has come through this program. Iowa's program was a premier program in this country. And the fact that it's dwindled, and the work that Dr. Berry is doing to make sure that it is recognized and it is rebuilt is absolutely amazing. And I think she deserves another round of applause for the effort that she's putting into that. As an academician, I know it's not easy to work with our administration to understand the importance of some programs, and I support you in all the work that you're doing, and anything that I can do, please let me know. But anyway, I was trying to talk to 12:30, so here you go.
You know, you did bring up something that I think is really important for us to think about, and that is the Iowa Black Alumni Association and the Iowa Black Network Alumni Network, have been really instrumental in pulling our graduates together. So if you're not participating in either or both of those, I would really encourage you to do that. The president is with us today, Ms. Billy Townsend. And I also have been thinking about, and I was going to bring it up with my faculty, but I'm going to announce it right here, that one of the things I would love for African American Studies to do is to have an advisory board. And particularly, we've been working very closely with the Iowa Black Alumni Association, because I'm on their board, and I would like to put together an advisory board for African American Studies so that we can begin, or not begin, but continue to grow and enhance and develop. Matter of fact, one of my big issues, which a lot of people know, including folks at the administration, is I want African American Studies to move back into a department status out of a program status. I think that's a very important place for us to be. It's a very important move that we need to make, particularly when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion on this campus, because it's supposed to be so important. And I think showing people the importance by supporting African American Studies and allowing us to go back into departmental status so that we are equal to a lot of the other departments on this campus is a crucial and important movement for us. So I'm going to continue to work in that direction, push in that direction. And again, I do plan to continue to work with the Iowa Black Alumni Association, because I think that they are doing a great job. They're supporting us financially in our Darwin Turner Endowment, and also they give some wonderful scholarships. We have an awards ceremony that African American Studies does each year. We give out our own awards, scholarships, and then the Iowa Black Alumni gives out anywhere from 2 to 3 scholarships a year. And the National Association of Black Journalists give out a scholarship, and we also give out a cultural arts award, and an award for the graduate student who's working on a cultural project in relation to African American Studies. So we want to recognize and honor the projects and the significant and important kinds of activities that are going on in this campus. I think that that's crucial, and I think that's a role that African American Studies needs to play. And I do promise to continue to fight the good fight and push African American Studies into the direction that it needs to go.
Dr. Venice Berry asked that I come and be a current student panelist and also perform some spoken word at the luncheon later, as I love African American Studies. I love being an African American Studies major. I'm very for all of our resources here on campus for Black students, for people who want to learn and grow in Black history, and I am a Black historian myself. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to meet all of these amazing people who have put in the work before even I was born, you know, and to feel just this love and support for a major that just means so much to me is just pivotal in my senior experience.
I am an alumni of the university, graduated in '97, African American World Studies, and I am really thankful for having the experiences through that, being in that field of study that brought me to the university and that I participated in while I was here. It was enriching. I'm thankful and honored to be asked to be on the panel and to talk about my experiences, and it helped me to grow into the person that I am today. So thank you.
This program was absolutely wonderful. I'm so glad I had the opportunity to travel back to Iowa City, even for a brief moment, to participate. The importance of this program in my personal and professional development is just priceless. So to be able to be here and to share that experience and to hear the experiences of others, to further enforce the importance of this now program that should be a department is definitely a blessing for me. So thank you for having me.